You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together.
And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, yoga instructor, and life coach, Tara O'Neill. Today, we're thrilled to have a truly inspiring guest with us today, Alan Lazaros. Alan is the founder and CEO of Next Level University, a podcast with over, get ready for this, 1,800 episodes focused on heart-driven, no-nonsense personal growth, which we'll get to in depth throughout the episode. Alan's life took a transformative turn after a near-fatal car accident, led him to question everything and ultimately commit to a path of self-improvement and fulfillment. With years of experience in coaching, training, and entrepreneurship, Alan has made his mission to help others create a life that balances success and purpose. We're excited to dive into his journey, discuss his unique insights on reaching your next level, and uncover the key to building a life full of meaning and resilience. Well, welcome aboard.
My goodness, what an awesome intro. Thank you. I want to start and end with gratitude. Every podcast I go on, I make that my sandwich, everything in gratitude. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for you two spreading self-improvement into the world. And I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, we are really excited. I'm a little selfishly excited for this one because I feel like you could probably teach even the self-improvers some more self-improvement. But you have such a nice, light, fun energy. So I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that. I will bring the energy. I've got some caffeine in me, so we should be able to rock and roll.
So I'm sure that when people hear fatal car crash, they want to get right into how that went. I don't know, starting a little bit before that. Why did it take that life and death experience to get you to jumpstart it? You know, what was going on prior to that? Where do you think your trajectory, your road was leading?
So there's you guys are probably very aware of this, the ACE score, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Well, I'm someone who didn't know that existed back in my mid-20s. So I'm going to be 36 November 17th. So I'm going to be Alan version 3.6. I also,
all right,
full disclaimer.
Welcome here.
Okay, nice. The disclaimer that I say to everyone now is I'm an engineer. And my business partner says that gives you permission to be all ones and zeros. No, but I'm an engineer, and so everything's numbers for me. So Alan 3.6 is very different than Alan 2.6. So Alan 2.6 got in that car accident. And really, to bring it back to the ACE score, I didn't even know that existed. But in hindsight, it's very clear. I had a very, very high ACE score. And we can go into that, my childhood, if you'd like. And you guys might know this, but people with a high ACE score have a high statistical probability of early mortality. And that car accident really woke me up and got me reflecting. I call it my quarter life crisis. And I have these sort of 3 circles of the ego. I try to make everything as practical as possible. And the outer layer, 3 circles, the outer layer is who you want others to believe you are. The next layer in is who you want to believe you are. And then the inner layer is who you really are. And the car accident for me collapsed all 3 of those circles. Sort of the phoenix burned down from the ashes sort of metaphor. And my new goal in life, no joke, is to keep those circles the same. Because we lie to ourselves and we lie to each other, particularly men. And I don't want to be mean to men, but I think we tend to embellish a lot. And we talked offline a little bit how I think women are more humble, statistically speaking. As much as I might be villainized for that, it's just true. And that said, I think in hindsight, I was very achievement-oriented. I was very improvement-oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement-oriented. I wasn't personal growth, personal development. I wasn't focused on the inner work. I was so achievement-oriented externally. And I was professionally developed, but I wasn't personally developed. Resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, computer engineer, master's in business, And it was very clear in hindsight that a lot of that was chasing sort of what I thought I was supposed to achieve in sort of response to some of my traumas, my stepdad leaving at 14, father passing away at 2. And after 26, I realized my father passed away in a car when he was 28. So my car accident really shook me because that was, I sort of had a second chance my dad never got. And after that, I went all in on self-improvement. I mean, dialed that thing up to 11. And from that moment until now, that's almost 10 years ago, I've been all in on personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, inner work. And then I hoped that success would be a byproduct of that instead of the other way around, which did take much longer. And yes, I did go broke with that approach. And it's not until my mid-30s where I feel like I'm both externally successful and internally fulfilled. And I think that's where we all want to get. And it's actually very hard to do both of those simultaneously because a lot of the work that's meaningful to us and fulfilling is actually not that profitable in the 21st century economy.
So true. Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a I definitely want to talk about that because the personal growth. I've had a lot of coaches, and they're like, "That doesn't sell, doesn't sell." And so I feel you on that. We'll get back to that, but let's go back to the ACE score. So Brian, teacher, I'm a former teacher, criminal justice. I wanted to work with prisoners, and I think they say something like 80% have a really high ACE score. Can you talk about what the ACE score is? What are some of the things that are on that?
Yeah. So as far as breaking the ACE score down, you guys ever read a book called The Body Keeps the Score?
Yeah.
All right. So the reason I bring that up is because, like I said, I'm big into peak performance and self-improvement and the compound effect and atomic habits and and I would say productive output for me is on the higher end, and I'm very analytical and engineer oriented and achievement oriented. But The Body Keeps the Score is a book that I wasn't drawn to. And I picked it up and I started listening to it, and the beginning talks about all the stats. 6% of people this, 7% of people that, 10% of people experience this, 12% of people. And I just got and I was like, whoa. And I got super triggered. And the reason I got super triggered is because I know the math. What's 6%? So if you're 6 out of 100 times 7 out of 100 times 12 out of 100 times 7 out of 100 times 5 out of 100, let's say you have every single one of those traumas, you're actually like 1 in a billion if you do the math. And so statistically speaking, that book helped me understand that my ACE score is extremely high, and my therapist has since confirmed that because I finally had the courage to ask her. Her name's Carol, and she's been doing therapy for decades, and she does the IFS modality. But I finally had the courage. I already knew the answer, by the way. Deep down, you know the answer. But I needed someone who knew to sort of validate that. And I finally had the courage. I was working with her for about 6 months, and I finally had the courage to say, just statistically speaking, I need to know. And I already knew. I said, 0 to 10, where's my level of trauma? 0 being, happy, healthy, positive childhood, even though we all experience trauma, frequency, density, intensity, duration changes. But for me, 10 being the most you've ever personally witnessed. And I know she's been doing therapy for decades, so I know what that is because I'm a coach. But and I see a lot of it. I can only imagine what therapists go through in their practice. And she said, Alan, it's the highest I've ever seen. And I could tell she wanted to lie to me. She didn't want to tell me because she didn't want to hurt me. And I bawled my eyes out, and I went, and I had this moment though after crying because I already knew. You already know. That's why you're asking the damn question, right? But for me, that kind of freed me and made me realize, okay, I now have confirmation to something that I already knew. And we can get into it if you guys want, for sure, even though I never talked about it until my 30s, certainly not on a public medium. But I said, okay, now that I'm free of that and I'm aware that it's the highest she's ever seen. She said, it's the highest I've ever personally seen. And she said, due to the chronic nature of it, it was, ongoing. And after that, I was kind of freed in a sense that, okay, instead of I'm so different than everyone else, and I've always felt so different, and I am such an esoteric weirdo to such an extreme extent. And if I told you my story, that would be very clear. But instead of that's a bad thing, I finally got to realize, okay, so the reason I'm so different is because I've experienced something that's, because a lot of people think, well, you're not alone. Statistically, that's untrue for some people. My therapist has said these exact words. She literally said, Alan, the truth is, statistically, you are alone. You're in the 0.05 percentile of intelligence. I've always known that. And you're not allowed to say that, by the way, not about yourself. And it wasn't until my 30s I actually started to actually acknowledge, these things. And from where I came from to where I got now, I need to be very clear with everyone. Like I, was intellectually gifted. And if I wasn't, there's no way I would have made it through any of that. So to your question, I would say, while I don't know the exact ACE score itself, what I do know is that through Carol and through my work in therapy, I do understand, and I always knew it on the soul level, that my adversity was unbelievably statistically high. And the last thing I'll say is this. I think this is important. There's two types of adversity. There's the adversity that happens to us, frequency, intensity, density, duration. Then there's the adversity that comes from aiming high toward huge aims. And it turns out I unintentionally did both. I didn't know that, but I had my trauma response was aim higher, work harder, get smarter. And I know a lot of super achievers are like that, prove your worth type of thing. And in my 30s, I finally got into this place where I know, okay, I'm never going to feel worthy after the achievement. I need to give myself that in advance and be proud of me. And really, that's what it's come to now at this point is just reaching your own unique potential. Not based on what my mom says or what society says, but based on what I actually feel in the mirror. And that's the behind me, I have a poem called Man in the Mirror. And that's why it's up there, is because ultimately, after coaching hundreds of people at this stage, I have it tracked over 8,000 podcasts, coaching, training, and speaking. You just realize everyone really just wants that. They just want to look in the mirror and actually be authentically proud of who they've become.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think that the ACE test might be available to those randomly that want to look up online, because I do think one of the key things is like validating it. Like, in your heart, but like, I'm so glad that you had Carol to validate that for you, because that was probably a game changer. And that's where you're like, oh, wow, I can be me because I'm not just making this up in my mind.
Yes. Right? Yeah, that was when another layer of owning who I am, owning all of who I am, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's ultimately what we all want too, is to own all of who we are, which goes back to those 3 ego circles I talked about, of what we want others to believe about us, what we want to believe about us versus the truth. And there's the truth will set us free thing. And I know that sounds fortune cookie, and I don't mean the religious text by any means. What I am saying, however, is like candor with self and with others is the hardest thing in the world to sustain because of shame. And some of the shame is warranted from our own terrible behaviors and choices. And some of it has nothing to do with us. It wasn't my fault my dad died at 2. It wasn't my fault my stepdad left at 14. It wasn't my fault that I kind of lost 3 families by the time I'm 14 years old. However, I have to find a way to take responsibility for making a great life out of that. And I think that that's the hardest thing in the entire world. That's way harder than doing some marathon or something, I think.
Absolutely. Where did you end up finding, even though you didn't have anyone that was quite like you, which is also nice in a sense to have heard that, because you couldn't connect with anyone, where did you find your people, or did you go inward first? And when I think of your circles, I think of like massive, what we might call a spiritual awakening or spiritual emergency or crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about how that was probably a little destabilizing and even more isolating?
Yeah, it was brutal. So the car accident, we were physically okay. My little cousin, so the 3 families thing, we got kind of ostracized from my mom's side of the family, and only 2 of them have ever come back that I've ever seen since I was 14. And I was in my mid-20s. My cousin Jeff, his son Dan, was in the car with me, and we were both physically okay. Fortunately, it was not a fender bender. It was a head-on collision. I just happened to be driving. I always say thank you, Volkswagen. I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat. I used to call it the tank. And it totally saved my life. Holy crap. Both airbags deployed. The whole front end was smashed in, but the frame stayed. So thank you, Volkswagen. Seriously. However, the circles that sort of collapsed on themselves, there was post-traumatic growth for sure. And that's obviously what gets focused on usually on podcasts, but there was PTSD for sure. I mean, I struggled to get back in a car. I kept getting pulled over because I was too far on the right side of the road because I crossed the double yellows at an intersection. It was my fault. So double yellow lines were freaking me out for a while. So I kept getting pulled over on the right side. I kept popping my tires because I was too far on the right side of the road. I was claustrophobic for a short time. Crowds bothered me. So I had some stuff to work through for sure. That said, though, it really opened me up to personal development and self-improvement. More than anything, that's really what I found self-improvement. Because before that, I was so achievement-oriented, but it hadn't opened me to self-work, the self-improvement piece. And I often joke, I say men can't even ask for directions, never mind get a therapist. And the reason I joke about that is because I didn't get a therapist till my 30s. And for someone who had a challenging childhood like me, therapy should have been a part of my life from the get. And that would have been super powerful, assuming you have the right therapist, because if you don't, that's a terrible idea. That said, to answer your original question regarding the scaffolding all collapsing in on me, what was the original question again?
I think I was wondering if that was very, very challenging. I mean, it's hard to say because you had it tough to begin with, but so challenging is not the right word, but maybe a different, like you see the world from a different lens, right? An awakening, so to speak. So
Yep.
now it's like we weren't sure who we were to begin with, and then this happens, and then it's like, well, where am I, and what circle am I, and how do I even begin to pick up the pieces and find my identity?
Yep. So I think a lot of us when we're born, and I use The Lion King as a metaphor. I think that's why it's such a powerful play and film. And it resonates with me in particular because father passed away, kind of ran away from his problems, Hakuna Matata, pretend everything's fine when it's not. And then you have to go back and face Pride Rock and realize as a grown man how bad it actually was. And then sort of not act like a little cub again around your uncle, in my case, stepdad. And again, it's not exact, but it's definitely something that's always resonated. And I never knew why that was one of my favorite films. Same with Good Will Hunting, another one of my favorite films. And so you had mentioned sort of I didn't fit in.
Massachusetts coming out.
Yeah, right there. You know it. But it's not just that. It's also the abandonment challenges of so the McCorkle. My real last name is McCorkle. My birth father, John McCorkle, Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette, big Irish Catholic family in Massachusetts. To your point. Once we became the Lazaroses, my stepdad came into the picture from age 3 to 14. We sort of didn't associate much with the McCorkles. And then when I took his last name, I think around age 7 or something like that. And my mom and stepdad didn't get along well. And that's a polite way to put it. And then my mom's side, after my stepdad left, he took his entire extended family with him. Haven't seen a single one of them since. And then my mom's side, my Aunt Sandy and her got in a fight. We got kind of ostracized from that side too. So by the time I'm 14 years old, most of the scaffolding had kind of crumbled. And then when I got in my car accident, that's when I realized that I had gone so far away from my true self. So I think that we're all born with sort of an essence and a natural inclination and our true self. And then I think we get conditioned out of being our true self through those layers of the ego that I actually haven't shared this story in a long, long time, but my business partner and I, we gave a speech one time. It was a very unique situation where we gave a speech, 4 speeches in one day. And it was so fascinating because it was 7th and 8th graders. Then it was 9th and 10th. Then it was 11th and 12th. And then it was the teachers. What a weird day that was, because we gave the same speech, but the receiver was so different each time. The middle schoolers were way more open. It was about growth mindset and perseverance and long-term thinking. And the amount of ego, the middle schoolers were loving it. Even though our performance, I thought it's the first one of the day, I thought our performance was not that good. Our performance got better and better and better, but the reception of it got lower and lower and lower. So I was existential crisis sort of behind the scenes with Kev going, my business partner, what is the deal? What does this mean? Oh, the development of the ego. By the time we got to the juniors and seniors, they might as well have been making fun of us. Their ego is so big at that age. And so when you're young, you're so open and you're so humble and you're so innocent and you don't have tons of junk and trauma yet. And I think that conditioning and society and culture and your caregivers or lack thereof, you start to sort of get away from your essence. And then the car accident, I think, was my journey back. It's my journey back to true self, but like now as a man instead of a cub, so to speak, in that metaphor. And then go ahead.
No, I was thinking about, like you said, your journey back to true self, revenge, right? With the childhood trauma, there are you had said there's bad decisions that you had made, going too hard, trying to maybe get out of your situation, trying to achieve too much by any means necessary. But, especially with younger traumas, it's there's outside people that influence them, right? And then make decisions on your behalf that lead you to having these negative experiences, conditions, and neglect. Did you ever feel the need? Is there any part of you that wanted to go back and find these people and tell them this is what you did, or even just I made it despite of you? Is there any place for that, or is that too toxic to do? I mean, I feel like our ego wants us to do that, right? Either letting them know that we've made it, or being like, what the f, like, were you thinking I was a kid? Is there any room for that, or is that just like totally toxic to yourself, and you just
Yeah, that is the philosophical question right there, huh? It's interesting, and it's a duality. A duality is holding two seemingly opposing ideas in your consciousness simultaneously. So Kev, my business partner, he grew up without a dad as well. Didn't meet his dad until he was 27. Grew up in a very, very, very rural environment would be the polite way to put it, I suppose. And we both came from very, very challenging beginnings, I guess. There was no setup for success type of thing. That said, what I tell him is this, is I say, we have chips on our shoulders. Anyone who's ever talked to me can tell. It is what it is. I mean, come on, right? Who gets straight A's through high school, goes to one of the best schools, and like all this stuff. And I'm driven to a ridiculous extent. I mean, I haven't taken a day off, honestly, in 10 years. And
Wow.
Not a full day off. Yeah. And the reason why that is because I want to reach my potential maybe more than anyone I've ever met. My beautiful girlfriend, she fortunately is the one person I know who really wants to reach her potential. I mean, it's unfreaking believable. But I've always been so much more driven than other people, and I never knew why. Is that because I have potential they don't? Is that because I was, had a really adverse childhood and my trauma response to that was to fight harder, aim higher, work harder, get smarter? Or is it both? Probably both. And so what I tell Kev is this. I said, we have chips on our shoulder, and people know that. You don't do 1,900 episodes without missing a day without a chip on your shoulder. And the truth is some people, with all the love, you are a little bit lazy. I'm not trying to be a dick, but like some people are very lazy. And of course I would think that. And Kev says, well, why are they lazy? Why aren't you just really hardworking? It's like, oh, that's an interesting reframe. I said, what if it's both? But anyways, not to do the comparison thing. What I do want to do is, I told Kev this. I said, don't take the chip off your shoulder. Just don't let the chip run you. I have a chip on my shoulder, and I know that. The difference between me now and me when I was younger is I used to let the chip run me. And now I run the chip. And so, yeah, I still want to reach my potential, and I still want to change the world, and I still want to work every day and get better every day and exercise every day for 2.5 years and all this stuff that I'm doing. However, it's not like a toxic need to be better than. It's more of, yeah, I want to reach my potential. I have to. I'm supposed to. I'm called to. I don't want to just hang out. Sometimes I do, but for the most part. And so hopefully that answers your question. But when it comes to the revenge piece, when I was younger, I had more people doubting me than I can freaking count. I could give you a list of 100 people that doubted me and my dreams. And you know what it is too? I never realized until later when I reflect back that I thought everybody had big goals and dreams. I thought everybody believed in themselves, right? They're mirroring me and they're acting like they do. Everyone acts like they believe in themselves. Very rarely do they actually do it. And then you get older and older and older and older and you realize, oh, so you guys were just like talking about stuff. I never said I was going to do something and then like went to the beach, I playfully say that because a lot of people like set a New Year's resolution and then they're at the beach the next day. It's, you need to dial in your metrics and habits and all that kind of stuff. So ultimately, there was a lot of that I'm going to prove myself thing, especially early on. And then when you do achieve these things, you realize that it was never about that. And then you transform that prove yourself thing into something more virtuous, I would say. But I'll tell you what, the chip never really goes away. Yeah.
So when you were talking earlier, about the 10 years, working out every day, massive amount of interviews and hosting and doing all that for next level. It sounded like a lot of no BS. So where's the heart driven come in, and why is that important?
The heart driven is I'm not, and I said this earlier. I have a new client. Her name's Nikita. She's from Dubai, and she's actually a really famous model, it turns out. But I say this to all my clients now. I never used to because I was such a coward, ultimately. And to go back to what you had said about, me being different, I used to be a chameleon. I used to dial myself down to fit in everywhere. So I wouldn't speak up. Like, here's what I really think and really believe, and here's what I know is okay to say. And so I would and that's the Goodwill Hunting thing, sort of, right? Little did I know the abandonment challenges created this part of me that constantly tried to make sure I didn't lose anyone else, unconsciously. But yet I was also this weird esoteric super achiever. So good luck with that, right? And so then when my mission became to reach my own unique potential and help others do the same, it's written on my whiteboard, I realized, okay, wait, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable because I don't want to be abandoned. However, I'm trying to help people reach their potential. And even in this episode right now, a lot of people think I'm dialing this up. A lot of people think, oh, he must be full of it. He doesn't work every day. I'm actually dialing it down. This is actually me scared to share that. I remember we did this fitness challenge, my girlfriend and I, starting on March 1st of 2022. And I just wanted to do 4 months of consistent exercise without missing to beat my old best. Then we got to a year. And she's like, well, we pull into the garage. And I said, now what? And she says, well, let's do this forever. And I had a mini panic attack because I know what that means. And I told her, I said, listen, if we say we're going to do that, we're doing that no matter what. And so it started with 30 minutes a day, and now it's 45, which is unreasonably hard to sustain, by the way. It sounds simple, like 45 minutes a day. It's not that big a deal. Unbelievably hard to sustain. Whoa, that's been humbling. But we've done it now for almost 3 years. And the reason I share that is because it got to a place where at the beginning it was cool to share and people loved it and my whole team was doing it. Everybody's got streaks going. And then eventually it gets too much and now it's actually uncomfortable to share. Because people either think, number one, you're lying, or number two, it's such a mirror because most people can't even do a week. Right? And so here's what I would say. The heart-driven piece is vulnerability. My business partner says this. I've started saying this. There's 2 types of people in this world. There's people that are fearful and there's liars. They're just not fearful of the same thing. So everyone is afraid of either all of them is not enough or all of you is too much. And for me, I'm afraid that all of me is too much. And I very heavily trigger the people that feel not enough. And so we trigger each other. Okay. And sometimes the trauma response to those triggers is very negative. And then my trauma response to those negative experiences, being bullied and all that, was aim higher, work harder, get smarter, which made it worse. And that was a cycle that I ran for most of my life up until my 30s when I started to understand, oh, okay, so you're not like a likable dude. Okay, so you can dial yourself down the rest of your life and people still kind of aren't going to like you. And that might even be why they're not liking you, because they know you're not owning all of who you are. And so now I actually have to have the courage, social courage, to say, yeah, honestly, I do work every single day and I do love what I do and I do actually want to reach my potential. And while a lot of people talk about that, they don't necessarily walk it.
Yeah, Tara, before 1 second, what are the challenges with kind of keeping a workout streak going for that long when you're traveling and when you're away? What are some kind of secrets or plans that you do mentally to prepare, whether it's bands or whether it's scoping out what place is going to have a gym for you, or where there's a park to run? Not sure. what your regimen is, but what are some things you do to avoid getting the built-in excuse? Oh, I'm going on vacation for a couple days. I got to stop, or I'm going away on business. I'm not gonna be able to work out, and then that snowballs into bad habits again.
Yeah, well, the power of the streak thing is awesome. Once you have a streak going, you'll do so much to keep it in anything. So that's really powerful too. But the truth of the matter is, two things really made this possible. Three. Number one, I do it with Emilia, which is my best friend and my partner. We are just head over heels in love. We have a business together. I mean, we live together. So I have a peak performance partner every single day, and we hold each other accountable. So that's number one. Number two, we started off small, 30 minutes a day to start. And this is the cool. It needs to be specific enough to check the box, but free enough to where you can do it even when you're traveling. So walking our dog counts. Walking counts. Swimming counts. Jogging counts. We did a 5K once, that counted. Hiking counts. Weight training counts. So every other day we try to weight train because we're big into strength training. However, any bodily movement for a consistent half hour, we always set a timer, at least a half an hour, and it's been 45 actually this year, which has been atrocious. Kind of. Honestly, it's been brutal, genuinely. Like, we're gonna go to pole day tonight. We're both working till 7, and then we're gonna do a push day, actually, chest. And I mean, it's we set a timer. Sometimes I'm counting the seconds. It is what it is. But ultimately, you have to have it be big enough to where your brain says it will make a difference, but small enough to where it's actually sustainable. And most people, they do regimens that are too strict to where they can't sustain it. Because if we had to have a gym, the truth is, there was this one night we were up in New Hampshire at this place called the Chateau. We actually call it the Shitto because that place sucks. But honestly, it was terrible.
Will not
oh my
be
goodness!
In the show notes. Links will not be.
Honestly, it's like a funeral home. I mean, it wasn't good, and we spent a lot of money too. But ultimately, it's 11:30 at night, and her and I are, loving our little getaway, and we're snuggled up, watching a film. We're eating food, and we're like, oh, we forgot to exercise. And this is last winter, freezing freaking cold. She sailed D1 for Providence College, so she's used to the freezing cold weather and basically nearly getting frostbite. But I'm telling you, man, we were out there walking in the parking lot in midnight, and just it was honestly awful.
For the streak, gotta keep the streak
for
going.
the streak. And again, at the end of the day, yeah, we have a community and we have a lot of people doing this. I have a person named Brandon on my team. He's done Miles for Mindset. He does a mile a day every day for over 760 days now. Wow. So it will spread, and it's really cool, and it's bigger than me, so that helps too. But it needs to be, you need a peak performance partner, someone who's counting on you. You need to create a streak, and you need it to be big enough to matter, but small enough to sustain. And you cannot say it has to be swimming or it has to be weight training. Otherwise, there's just no way when you're traveling, to your point.
Love it.
That's amazing. Thank you. So, unfortunately, this is only going to be an hour podcast, but I have so many questions. Thank you for all of the work that you do for humanity. And I love what you shared about, triggering other people. It's almost, it's you get over this idea of like helping other people is going to be rainbows and butterflies, because a lot of times your light's going to just trigger the crap out of their shadow, right? And so it's like, you're not going to be likable. You hit a point where you're just like, all right, it's fine. I got to make peace with it. Yeah. But let's go to the workout obviously is going to help you from burning out. But could you share how you don't burn out, in the sense of, do you prioritize sleep? Like, it sounds like, you and your partner have a lot of fun. Like, you make sure you have time for, joy and casual, like, non-work things. But what would you recommend to younger you that maybe did burn out? Did you burn out? Was it severe? How did you bounce back from that?
Well, so pre-car accident, I drank too much and too often, and I definitely struggled with the alcohol thing, and I wasn't taking good care of myself. Post-car accident, I totally fixed that. Fitness model, fitness coach, fitness competitor. So I was a fitness coach, so I had this formula. Everything's a formula for me. I'm an engineer. That's my disclaimer. I said it at the beginning. So sleep, hydration, nutrition, like, if you want to be at your best, this is the formula. Okay, I'm going to give it to you. And I always say this too. I say, anyone can teach you how to lose weight or how to exercise. Almost no one can get you to actually do it. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the doing it that's the problem. Most stuff you can Google. Okay, but ultimately this is the formula. So sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, mobility, breath work, and supplementation. Those are the 7 things that I use. And Kevin calls me a cyborg, my business partner, playfully, because he's trying to keep up. But ultimately, what it really is yeah, maybe there's some truth to, for example, my sleep score is always pretty good, and my resting heart rate in my sleep is like averaging of like 40 and lower sometimes. So he jokes and says, you take comas, the rest of us sleep. So there might be some genetic gifts and advantages. There probably are. However, I take really, really good care of those 7 pillars. Now, I actually ironically think I suck at those 7 pillars, but if I compare to other people, I'm really, really good. It's like if you ever met someone who's in unbelievably good shape who doesn't think they're in great shape, and the only reason they're in great shape is because they're actually aiming here and they're actually here, even though here is higher than everyone else. It's like an Olympic athlete. It's like, I'm not actually that strong or that fast. It's like, no, you're comparing to Usain Bolt though. Mm-hmm. And so I actually don't think I'm that good at these things, but when I do compare to other people, although I try to compare only to my potential, I would say sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, and mobility has been an unbelievably large focal point for the last almost 10 years. Sleep is the foundation. So it's a pyramid. And so I track my sleep score every night. So my sleep score last night was 85. That's pretty good. And again, my business partner, Kev, says that's unbelievable. I'm running over here on 60. But if you dial those 7 in and you work on them and incrementally design your life around taking care of the asset, not only will you age way better. I actually sat down with my girlfriend recently because I'm going to be 36 and God, I don't know how not to come off as pretentious sometimes. I don't think I'm aging super well. And I don't say that thinking I age poorly compared to other people. What I mean is I'm going to be 36 and there's certain things I'm noticing where it's like, whoa, I don't build muscle quite like I did in my 20s. Like, what is this about? Right. And so there's a lot you can do now for your longevity. And I actually study longevity often, but ultimately what it comes down to is sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, breath work, and supplementation. And it's a pyramid. So start from the bottom and go up. The last piece I'll share about this is you can zoom into each one of those. I mean, I could zoom into sleep and do a whole episode on just that. And then we could zoom into hydration and do an episode about that. And then we can, like my water bottle, you'll never catch me without this. Never. You'll never catch me without water on my person. And I've been doing that for 10 years. And my business partner, last piece, I got sick 2 times in 2024. 2024 has been really challenging. But that was the first time I had been sick. I'm talking even with the sniffles in 9 years since my car accident. And I'm someone who used to get sick all the time. I was unhealthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I wasn't taking care of the asset. I had low self-worth and high self-belief, and I didn't know it. Why are you going to renovate a house that you don't believe is worth it? I was externally achievement driven. I wasn't internally self-improvement motivated. And after that, I went all in on self-development, self-improvement, personal growth. And that's when I really started to ramp up my productivity. And that's when I really started to be able to burn hot without burning out. But I need this to be clear. The moment that I start feeling like my throat's a little itchy and I'm struggle bus, okay, I'm really quick to go back into my bubble. I have this little care package, emergency, all this different stuff I do. But ultimately, I call it R4, rest, relaxation, recharge, and rejuvenate. R4 cannot be the goal because if it's the goal, you'll just be pretty lazy. But it has to be a necessary piece. And I use the Tesla as a metaphor. You got to find your superchargers. Because otherwise you will burn out. You know, we charge our iPhone every day, and when it's at 20% battery, we immediately go charge it. But yet with ourselves, we aren't taking as good a care of ourselves. If you really want to flourish, you better take care of yourself, and you better take care of yourself really well. And then you'll have the energy and the vibrance to actually go perform consistently.
Yeah, no, I 100%. I mean, so much of it is the motivation, which I want to get to in a sec. But while we're in this state of mind of some of your non-negotiables, even if you are humble and realistic about not burning out and cognizant of that, you have to have, I would imagine, it's a legit routine in the morning, right? Because you have to start, if you're going to accomplish the things that you're talking about and that you've done and that we want others to do, it can't start out meandering and suddenly it's 9, 10 o'clock and then I'm ready
Yeah.
behind the 8 ball. There has to be Lazarus method, right? To either whether it's prepping the night before or for what you're doing in the morning, or these things that you have to hit by a certain time, or else the day's going to be off track and you're not going to be as effective and high performing. So, can you give us one or two items on that morning checklist?
Absolutely, of course. Well, the first I always go sort of macro, and then I'll bring it to the micro, as you guys have seen. I have my day broken into thirds, and then my week is Monday through Saturday front facing, and Sunday is R4. Although I do still work every day, it's not 14 hours every day. I need to make that clear. Like yesterday, I only worked an hour and a half. It was Sunday, and it was mostly an R4 day, although we did some house projects. But my week is broken Monday through Saturday. I do front facing, and each day is broken into thirds. So the first third is for me, which is the morning routine I'll get to in a second. Second third is for service, which is trainings, podcasting, and coaching. And the third is for fitness, food, and family. And family, I mean genuinely, Emilia and I. And then we live together. We have 2 cats and a dog. And we're going to have a family. But right now, that's our little family. But every single day, I break it into that. So my first call is until 10 a.m. I'm very grateful, by the way. In the beginning of this entrepreneurial journey, do not do what I'm doing now because you will go out of business. I used to have to do call. If your clients need you at 6 a.m., you got to be there at 6 a.m. in the beginning. If you get picky too fast, you're screwed. Don't act like Apple. Okay. Trust me, if you get cocky in business, you're going out of business quick, despite how good your Instagram is, right? But anyways, so I break my day into thirds. My first third is for me. Second third is service. Third is fitness, food, and family. My service window is from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So right now it's 3:51 p.m. I'm ending at, I actually think, 7 tonight instead of 6. But ultimately, I gotta cut, and then I gotta go into my evening. And the other thing that I need to make as clear as possible is I do get to work from home. Super important. When I travel, it's way harder. But now to answer your original question about the morning routine. So right now I have something called my Next Level 5 to Thrive. And I also do metrics and habits tracking. So my whole team, all my clients, I have 27 actually, as of last week, 27 individuals that I coach, business owners, business coaching. And I'll just break this down real quick. So goals, metrics, habits, skills, identity. Most people don't achieve their goals because the metrics, habits, skills, and identity are not in alignment. The identity is the therapy piece, okay? But the metrics, habits, and skills, that's coaching, baby. Let's go. What are we doing here? So again, try not to come off as pretentious. The idea, I'm a reverse engineer, so you tell me your goal, I can tell you the exact metrics and habits and skills that are necessary to achieve it. It's the identity that's holding you back, though, because you don't have enough courage, or you haven't looked at trauma, or you need to reassess what's motivating you. Maybe you have a chip on your shoulder. Maybe it's for revenge maybe the goals aren't aligned. Maybe you're trying to beat LeBron James at basketball. Terrible idea unless you're gifted as hell, right? So at the end of the day, we don't achieve most of our goals because the goals are predicated on low self-awareness. Back to the morning routine. My Next Level 5 to Thrive, which is part of that habit tracking, is I do my journal, which is a Dreamliner right here. I actually have it written on my whiteboard over here. So number 1 is Dreamliner. Number 2 is 20 minutes of learning. Number 3 is something called ROMWAD. It's a playlist, which it's essentially 7 days of long form, 20 minutes of meditative stretching and mobility work. And then the third is 45 minutes of exercise, like I had mentioned to you guys. And then the last one is 1 hour of R&R. And for me, it's usually film and food. I'm a huge film lover, always have, and I adore food. And I fast throughout the day. So I eat in the morning, I fast, then I have a little pre-workout, and then I eat a huge meal. Not right before bed, but in the evening, depending on what my macros, bulks, and cuts. But ultimately, those are my 5. And the Next Level 5 to Thrive is something the only rule is this: they have to be big enough to matter, small enough to sustain, like we talked about earlier, and they have to be what keeps you at your best. Because I tried doing this with writing and with batching WhatsApp and with social media, all this different stuff, and I kept burning out. I got sick twice this year. And the reason I got sick twice this year is because I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because I want to help people who are operating at high levels, for lack of better phrasing. I actually calculated this out. So in the last 4 weeks, I averaged 54 podcasts, trainings, and coaching sessions per week. So 54 per week over the last 4 weeks. This is the most that I've ever put on the court. And I'm grateful for the demand because I remember when it was crickets. So thank you guys seriously for having me. Thank you so much. However, I don't want to end up like Tony Robbins with his voice where he can barely talk anymore. And I respect Tony and his work. I do. His work has helped me tremendously, but I know that he's been traveling his whole life. He didn't take as good a care of himself as I know he wished he had. And I just don't want to end up like that. So I'm trying really hard to make sure my morning routine is about me, even though that's very hard as a CEO and business owner.
Yeah.
Before we move on from your self-care, you mentioned esoteric a couple times, and it was really hard for me to not make that my first question. So can you share a little bit, or whatever you feel comfortable with, in terms of your spiritual practice, connecting with the divine, or what you like to research, how you incorporate that into your life?
Yeah, well, the first thing is it has to be bigger than you. It has to be. What's a good example of this? I remember when I was younger, I had these big dreams. And what's a good example? Okay, when I was in high school, I was super, super nerdy. I was like a little straight A sort of engineer, and my sister was older than me, and she was the most popular girl in basically my whole high school. And I would get pity dances from her friends because I was this sort of prepubescent little nerd. And I remember thinking one day I'm going to be the guy, right? Because back then you're 5'3" and I look young now. Imagine me at 14. And this dude can dunk a basketball. He looks like a grown man. The teachers want him, never mind the students, right? And he's just and I got bullied and picked on and stuff. But I remember I had these dreams, and now I've achieved so many of them. I was a fitness model and a fitness competitor and all this stuff. The reason I'm saying this is because my spiritual calling is so much bigger than any of the vanity stuff, that the vanity stuff ends up coming. It's been really fascinating. I mean, I have people I coach I've coached famous individuals. I had mentors that were millionaires and one billionaire. But it was never, I find it so weird how little childhood Alan, for example, my new client, Nikita, famous model, I never, when I was a kid, was like, oh, I'm going to coach models one day who want to build jewelry brands and be actresses and all stuff. But then you're so fulfilled, you're so aligned, you work on yourself, and you work on this sort of mission, this purpose, this calling I'm going to get to in a second. And then everything that's a vanity metric that you used to think you wanted kind of ends up coming. And I say this to Kev. I say, Kev, by the time you achieve that dream car, you might not even want it. By the time you become the type of man who actually can afford that stupid car, by the way, you might not even want it anymore because you've matured past that. And he's like, no, man, I'm still going to want it. I'm like, yeah, you will, but it's going to be little Kev who wants it. And then when you sit in it, you're going to be like, oh, okay, it wasn't about that, right? And so I think that's the journey. So it has to be bigger than you was my point. And it is bigger than me. And after that car accident, I created a purpose statement that I wear this North Star around my neck. And I recite my purpose statement. I have it memorized, and I keep that part private. But ultimately, the mission that I'm on, and I used to say I want self-improvement to spread like COVID, and my business partner said, do not say that. So, because as an engineer, that's like what I want to happen, right? But it's too insensitive. Or it comes off as insensitive, I should say. But COVID spread 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And it spread exponentially. And most people, God, that sounds so pretentious. A lot of people don't understand exponentials. And as an engineer, you only think in exponentials. And by the way, the whole universe is only exponentials. There is no linear anything. No tree grows linearly. And so I know we got to jump here in a second. But
split a cell, right? Split a cell into two.
Yeah, exactly. 1, 2, 4. That's why COVID was so scary. And the reason I say it is because everyone can relate to it because we all experienced it. It grew so fast because it was 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. So that's what I want to have with self-improvement. And so I said this to you guys even off air. Thank you for allowing me to come and help spread self-improvement, because ultimately that is what I was missing from my childhood. And there
That's
was
awesome.
not a lick. Go ahead.
No, that's amazing. I have to mention this because you mentioned them a couple of times. I always want to ask one question for our listeners. You've given us so much information already. That's amazing. You mentioned your partners a couple times, right? Your business partner and your life partner. For people that are trying to do this on their own, one way or the other. I guess we'll go into the business side of things. What should they look for? What should they look for in a partner before they're committing, before they're splitting everything 50? And how will they know that they found someone that they can trust with this project that they feel so passionately about and that it's all going to work out? I mean, no one's omniscient, but what are some things that they can look for, and why is it important to have somebody, have a right-hand man or woman?
Well, I promised I'd start with gratitude and end with gratitude. I just realized it's 4:00 and I have a client. And thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. But I do want to answer that question super fast before we get off here.
Sure.
When I actually coach couples, I have been for 4 years with my partner Emilia. We have a podcast called the Conscious Couples Podcast, and essentially it's stay conscious, stay aware. And what I would answer your question with is aligned goals, aligned core values, aligned beliefs. When you have core aspirations, core values, and core beliefs in alignment, but yet complementary skill sets and the sort of yin and yang approach to feedback, masculine, feminine, it can really be beautiful, whether it's male or male, female or female, or male and female. And that's the shortest possible answer I can get because I got to get to my coaching call with Matt. Thank you both so much for having me. And
Absolutely.
thank you for what you do in the world.
We'll link everything, everyone, to connect with you in the show notes. And thanks for doing what you do. It's been a pleasure. Great meeting you.
Honor. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.